Hello, now I'm going to discuss about shift register. This is one of the very important question they always used to ask. Either they will ask you to explain about different types of the shift registers, or you have separate questions. There you have question about the universal shift register. So here we are going to see normal shift registers, and here we have four different types of the shift register that we are going to see here. First one we call that is the serial in, serial out. Then we have serial in, parallel out. Again we have parallel in, serial out. Then we have parallel in, parallel out. So here I'm trying to explain how these shift registers are going to work in this all four different situations. Later we'll take example for one by one. Then we have little bit more depth knowledge about each type of the shift register. So here if you see in this block here left side, so all situations are shown here. Now suppose for example, now we are going to talk first about serial in, serial out. So in case of serial in, now here we'll consider this connection. So for the construction of the shift register, we are considering the D flip-flop. Since we know that D flip-flop is the transparent flip-flop where whatever input you will give, that will appear at the output, as well as it is economical to use. So in case of serial in, data will be given at leftmost flip-flop. If you are trying to perform the right shift, then leftmost flip-flop will be given as the input, and rightmost flip-flop is going to give us the output. So from here we'll get the data output. So here one by one, this is going to trigger. So actually this is the type of asynchronous circuit where output of the previous flip-flop is going to trigger the next flip-flop. So like this, when output is going to come from the previous, then only shift will take place. Suppose for example, now here we have 0, then again in the next clock it will come here. Again next clock it will come here. Again in the next clock it will come here. And in between, what is the data input? Successive, that is going to pass from the one flip-flop to another flip-flop. Whereas if you consider the another situation, if you talk about the serial in and parallel out. So in case of serial in, again, data will be given to the leftmost flip-flop only. But at the same time, we can obtain the output from the each flip-flop. But if you see that in the initial stage, the output of the maximum flip-flop will be 0. Since after each clock pulse only, data input will be transferred from one flip-flop to another flip-flop, and finally the desired output will be available. So that was about serial in, parallel out. Again, if you consider the next situation where we have about parallel in, serial out. So in case of parallel in, serial out, we'll consider this scenario as the input. Here D0, D1, D2, D3. This is sound for the 4 bits. So if you see that here MSB bit is given to the leftmost flip-flop and LSB bit is given to the rightmost flip-flop. But we are going to obtain the data serially from here rightmost flip-flop. So first we'll get the LSB bit. Again, next bit will be transferred from here to here. Again, next bit will be transferred from here to successive we are going to obtain. And at last, we are going to obtain the MSB bit in case of parallel in, serial out. Similarly, we have last situation is parallel in, parallel out. So in case of parallel in, parallel out, again, data is given input here parallelly. All flip-flops have data bits parallelly available, and we can obtain the output also here parallelly. Again, here depend upon the situation, how we are going to obtain the data, how these flip-flops are being triggered. On the basis of that, we'll see how transfer takes place in case of parallel in, parallel out also. Later, if you see that in the right side, here we have just one of the example how transfer of the data takes place. So here we are considering that at the initial condition, when suppose clock pulse is not available or just clock is applied and positive edge trigger is not going to occur. So before that input is 0 and by default output of the all flip-flops will be 0. But when data is available, so like you are seeing here, data is applied here is 1, remaining data are 0. So it's going to generate the stream of bits where initial bit is 0, next bit is 1, and successive all bits are 0 here. Now in the clock pulse, if you see that it has transition from the 0 to 1. That means flip-flop is going to trigger when transition takes place from 0 to 1. So that is called as the positive edge triggered flip-flop. So whenever transition will takes place from 0 to 1, like you are seeing in this case also, then only flip-flop is going to trigger. So now for each triggering, since this clock pulse is applied where to the leftmost flip-flop, so after the first clock pulse, that flip-flop 1 having output as the 1. So that is on here. Again in the second clock pulse, suppose this is the first clock pulse is applied here. Again in the second clock pulse, what will happen here? The data input to the D flip-flop is 0. That is available at the output. And the previous output of the D flip-flop is shifted to the second flip-flop. So previous it was 1, so now it will be available with the second flip-flop. Again in the third clock pulse, since here inputs are going to be 0, so that you are seeing that how it is going to be shifted here. So this shifted here and this 1 is not now available to the flip-flop 3. Again in the fourth one, if you see that this 1 is going to reach to the fourth flip-flop and this 0 is available here and this 0 is available here and this is the new input which is given. At the end of fourth clock pulse, outputs are available at the output of the flip-flop. But finally, from the fifth flip onwards, fifth cycle onwards, we are able to get the outputs. So that output will be pop out from the fifth clock pulse and we'll get the desired outputs. So this is the one of the very important questions where they're going to ask you different types of the shift registers. And later now we'll see each type of the shift registers in details.